it is important for US companies to explore India, to get access to the Indian market, but at the same time have a level playing field.
The defense trade has grown tremendously as I've observed it over the years.
To have optionality, it's good for U.S., good for U.S. economy, good for business, good for long-term relationships.
Right.
But it's also good for pricing for the Indian consumers.
Hello and welcome to our special broadcast from Washington, D.C. to speak about the big Trump-Modi meeting. What's going to be on the table when trade discussions take place between the two leaders? Will there be a limited trade deal? And what impact will Elon Musk have on Donald Trump's trade vision vis-a-vis India? Will there be a message to China as well? To talk about this, I was joined by Mukesh Aghi, the president of US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Listen in. What's the expectation? What's the mood ahead of the Modi-Trump meeting?
Well, the mood is very positive. You have two leaders who have worked together in the past, and they have a strong relationship. I think the objective is to set the agenda for the next 4 years. Yes, there'll be focus on geopolitics, there'll be focus on trade, there'll be focus on technology transfer, there'll focus on people to people. The relationship is strong, and I believe that the agenda which is going to be set up is going to make it stronger.
Right. Now, clearly, Trump's focus is on getting China to the table, making China to give them concessions, and somehow put a lot of pressure, ultimate pressure tactics on China. In the midst of this all, where does India fit in?
Well, you have to understand India has maintained strategic autonomy in every aspect because it has to live with China on its border. But at the same time, China also has taken a position that it will never treat India as an equal partner. So India has to find its own position. Now, it does not mean that it's going to be 100% dependent on the United States. It will leverage that relationship. It's going to partner in a way that is win-win for both countries, but at the same time, do not sacrifice its autonomy vis-a-vis China itself. More important is I think the Trump team, from a geopolitical perspective, will try to leverage its partnership with India to put pressure on China. And it all depends how far India goes managing that also.
Right. Now, in terms of the areas where the Trump administration is going to put pressure to reduce tariffs, which would some of those sectors be?
So you have to understand that the average tariff India has, even though after bringing it down, is down to 11%, whereas the average tariff of US is around 3%. So there is a gap, and I think there'll be a lot of pressure, especially on the goods which are being exported from the US into India to be brought down. I don't think there'll be pressure on the agriculture side because US protects its agriculture, so does India protects its agriculture. So it will be goods, especially I call the capital goods which are coming from the US into India. I think but the bigger picture would be I call market access and level playing field. It is important for US companies to explore India, to get access to the Indian market, but at the same time have a level playing field. And I think that's where the pressure points will come in.
Right. Now, when it comes to average tariffs in India, what's been your immediate recommendation? And do you expect that to figure in talks?
My recommendation is basically think out of the box. Don't think, hey, we'll let the strawberries coming from the US and then India can export something else. I think focus on a bigger picture. And the bigger picture would be all right, why don't we do this is absolutely no tariff between the two countries. Make it zero and see the reaction, because Trump has to protect his agriculture base. India has to protect its agriculture base. So I think you have basically put the ball in the court of Trump to manage that. So I think India should take the approach, no tariffs between the two countries and see the reaction.
Realistically, can there be a trade deal during this visit, or there will be a roadmap?
No trade deal during this visit, but I think expectations will be set up to build a roadmap with certain timelines. And my thinking is that timeline would be when Trump comes to India for the Quad Summit to sign some kind of a trade deal with India.
Right. Elon Musk, broadly, he has been expected to have a meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Last year, he was slated to come to India. That did not happen. He went straight to China. What's going to happen this time around?
Well, obviously, government of India went way beyond its, I would say, dealing by bringing the tariffs down on EVs if you set up a manufacturing plant in India. And obviously, the Chinese used him to make sure he does not go to India. Chinese used him to embarrass the Prime Minister in the month of May during the peak elections itself. So I think there is a sense of, I would say, apprehension that will he keep up what he says? And so I think the onus is on Elon Musk now, whatever he says, to deliver on that, to build his credibility, because at the moment his credibility is zero.
Right. So, but do you expect him to probably launch Tesla, the low-cost models in India, Starlink, SpaceX? Are you expecting any kind of announcements in the next few months?
Well, you have to understand that the Tesla sales globally are coming down. So don't expect him to invest $3 billion to set up a new plant in another geography. So I don't expect that to come. But I think do expect some kind of approach and commitment from Elon Musk. I will do more sourcing from India, so it can deleverage China also, and provide that into the Berlin plant. But more important is I think once they announce a new car, which is a cheaper car, then Indian market becomes attractive for them. And they'll have to deal with, just like any other car company, deal with the tariff from that perspective. As far as the Starlink goes, he has ambitions to basically provide those services. And they are domestic opposition to that because it's going to strengthen the competition for Starlinks. So I think that's where give and take is going to take place. SpaceX, I think both, I would say ISRO and SpaceX can work together from the launch perspective, because I think SpaceX has the capacity to take heavy loads, and that's where the collaboration will take place between SpaceX and ISRO itself. So I think they are give and take, but I strongly believe now the onus is on Elon Musk to stand up to his commitment and deliver.
Right. Finally, one pain point which you hope that India will erase either during this visit or in the coming few months.
So I think you have to understand that the transport of illegal migration, at least there was a hue and cry from the opposition, and hopefully some kind of a deal will be done so you can move them on a humanitarian basis. And I think if nothing else, India can send its own planes to pick up those and bring them back. So that's I call the short-term pain point. I think the bigger long-term would be is how do you look at mobility of professionals from India into the US? Because there is a crying need in the US for those professionals, but the H-1B visa process has worked and it has not worked also. So I think that has to be streamlined. That should not be shut down. And I think what we're going to see is this administration will find a way to recruit PhD in STEM program, graduate people from STEM program, and fulfill that need on a stronger basis.
Right. Finally, there have been a lot of reports which say there could be anywhere in the range of 700,000 to 750,000 Indians staying illegally in America. Now, what is the status of those individuals, and is there a threat of their deportation?
So I think you have to understand we have roughly around 16 million illegals in the United States, and they make around 6% of the labor force. If you deport all of them, what really happens is the workers in the field, the workers in the restaurant, the workers in the construction side, that is going to get impacted. That means that it has an impact on the inflation also. So you cannot, in every practicality, deport all of them. And that means a large number of Indians also will be part of that process itself. So I think while every effort is going to make to appease the base of President Trump, but from every practical perspective, you can't deport all of them. So yes, there'll be compromises. Yes, there'll be some deportation, but overall, I would say that from a photo opportunity perspective, they will deport. I mean, they just only sent a batch of 104. It could go into I would say 15, 20,000, but that's the number I see as the capacity.
All right, Mr. Aghi, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Will the Trump administration in its second term continue to support joint manufacturing of weapon systems in India? That's something that India would like to watch out for when Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump meet. But clearly, there will be a wish list from the US side for India to buy more defense equipment from the US. I caught up with the CEO of General Atomic Global Corporation, Vivek Lall, to find out more about the India-US defense partnership. What's on the US wish list this time around?
I think the relationship is very strong between US and India. In Trump 1.0, as you know, Prime Minister Modi and his outstanding leadership with President Trump was able to build a lot of momentum that continued into the next administration. And here we are at the beginning of Trump 2.0. I think there will be a lot of synergies in the defense relationship, not only from a defense trade standpoint, but also from the operational standpoint. A lot of military to military exercises. And then indeed, a lot of collaboration and initiatives in terms of critical and emerging technologies.
Right. What do you think are the priorities of the US administration in terms of selling weapon systems to India right now?
So I think the defense trade has grown tremendously as I've observed it over the years. And as you know, it stands over $23 billion at the moment. And I think that is only poised to grow. And that is simply from a fact that when you have the largest democracy and the oldest democracy working hand in hand with common objectives against adversaries around the world, there is a meaningful collaboration in terms of platforms and certainly supply chains.
Right. Now, when we speak about General Atomics has recently concluded a drone deal with the Indian government. What next? Which are the areas where you would like to extend the relationship with India, the manufacturing relationship with India?
So, of course, we are very proud and we congratulate both governments for signing the LOA for the 31 MQ-9Bs. And along with that will come the MRO facilities that will be in India, as well as the joint collaboration that this brings. We have partnered with an artificial intelligence company as well as a semiconductor company in India, and we have a large supply chain that we are looking at and so forth. I think in terms of platforms, I think the unmanned platform is, again, something that most air forces and militaries are looking more towards. I think the numbers will continue to increase and the requirements will increase. You know, we also have an EMAL system. If India decides to go for a future aircraft carrier, that is a system that could, not only in the US, but the French and others have been working with that. So that's another area of opportunity. And then on the nuclear side, both nuclear fission and fusion, India is talking about small modular reactors as well as fusion capability for clean, limitless energy. So there are multiple areas that we work in as a company that can have synergies with what the Indians want.
Right. And broadly speaking, do you expect the US government to push for fighter jet sales to India? And perhaps will the joint manufacturing of defense items, will that get a push under the Trump administration as well?
I think so. I think co-production, co-development, those are, and indeed co-R&D for new platforms and capabilities is the way both the democracies could grow together and leveraging the strengths of each of the countries. So in India, you have a great talent pool and also innovation at a lower cost.
Right.
And if you combine that with the prowess of the American military system, both countries stand to gain.
All right, Mr. Lall, thank you so much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18.
Thank you so much.
On that note, we take a short break, but don't go anywhere. When we return, we'll get you an exclusive conversation with the president of the US Semiconductor Industry Association on what he expects from the India-US trade partnership. Welcome back. You're watching our special broadcast from Washington, D.C. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is here to have detailed discussions with Donald Trump. When it comes to the semiconductor partnership, the U.S. industry hopes that India will bring down tariffs drastically. And the president of the Semiconductor Industry Association here told me that if India wants to play a big role in global supply chains of semiconductors, then it must have a zero tariff policy. Listen in to that exclusive. Let me begin by asking you about your outlook for semiconductor production and demand. What were the sales and production figures like for 2024? What's your outlook for 2025?
First of all, big week for U.S.-India relations and very important for us because India is an important hub in our supply chains. For the outlook, well, first of all, 2024, very strong year. Overall, nearly 20% growth for the semiconductor industry after coming off a bit of a hangover from the pandemic. And the outlook for next year is something plus north of 11%. And I think that's because there's such strong interest in AI, but also industrial, automotive, chips are in everything from your toaster to refrigerators. And I think the long-term prospects for our industry are very, very bright.
Right. Give us a sense of where US is currently in terms of global semiconductor market share. Is China leading the race even now? Where would US be right now?
So I would say we continue to be the dominant player in the industry. It's been that way for several decades. Our global market share is north of 50%, and I anticipate it will stay that way for a while. China, of course, is coming up. We've had history of that kind of introduction of new competitors. Japan did that. Korea did that. We're all comfortable with new competitors as long as it's done in a way that's familiar to us and consistent with market economics.
Lots of action on the semiconductor front here in US. President Trump has proposed almost 100% tariffs on chips made in Taiwan. How will that be for American companies?
So I'll just say, we are very dependent on global supply chains. We are very dependent on our overseas customers, which represent about 75% of our revenues. So we got to get stuff overseas in a way that's as inexpensive as possible, with zero tariff treatment at borders if we can. But also, we're making a big push to increase our manufacturing here in the U.S. We talk about that a little bit more later. But so to build our fabs, our semiconductor manufacturing facilities, or to run our fabs, we need to import all sorts of gases and minerals and tools and metals. So anything that kind of raises the cost of manufacturing here in the U.S. puts at risk undermining kind of the overall objective of our industry. And I think the Trump administration, which is encouraging more semiconductor manufacturing right here on U.S. shores.
So would you completely oppose 100% tariffs? And if that were to happen, what would be the result?
I'll just say 100% tariffs would be problematic. I just think it would cause a lot of disruption.
What would be your recommendation? Because we believe that the CHIPS Act, which has spurred hundreds of billions of dollars in investment in the semiconductor industry by American companies, now all of that is up for scrutiny. It is being investigated. Contracts are being looked at for words like immigration, diversity. Has that created a bit of worry in the industry?
So first of all, I think it's important to note that the CHIPS Act got started. The spark was lit under the Trump administration. And again, the objectives of a CHIPS Act are entirely consistent with what President Trump is trying to do, which is bring more manufacturing generally and bring more semiconductor manufacturing specifically back to U.S. shores. Nearly $500 billion has been committed by the U.S. private sector to build more fabs here. Many of the fabs are already going up and near completion. It's 90 new projects across nearly 30 states. By 2032, we will have tripled our manufacturing capacity here in the U.S., faster rate of growth than anyone in the world, and we'll go from basically zero production of the most advanced chips to producing about 30% of the world's most advanced chips. So I think by any measure, that has been very, very successful. And with the Trump administration, we're very excited. They're talking about bilateral and sectoral trade agreements. We like that. Lots of countries around the world have been doing trade agreements in recent years, and we've not been. And the other thing is the new chief of USTR, the big trade negotiating body, has already confirmed that he is going to be looking for ways to increase our export opportunities.
All right. Now, speaking about India, SIA has done a report making recommendations on how to take forward the US-India partnership on semiconductors. What's your outlook? What more can be done?
Yeah, so we actually commissioned that report, and it was done by a think tank here in Washington called ITIF. India is, first of all, this is an important moment in our relationship with India. The strategic partnership between India and the U.S. is in a very good place. India is already an important hub in our supply chain, very strong in design and research, and in terms of the R&D that goes into equipment that builds the chips is very strong in India. But there is a fierce competition globally to be a bigger part of our supply chain. Other countries in Southeast Asia, other countries in this region, this hemisphere, are very much competing to be a bigger part of our supply chain. But I do feel that India is taking some very positive steps that I think will ensure India also plays a bigger role. And one of those steps is the political leadership all the way to the top is very, very committed to this. And we noticed in the union budget there was some provisions for increased trade facilitation. Well, that's very, very important to us. Also, there's some interesting tax measures going to be put in place that will be helpful. And we can talk about this in a bit too, but trade is super important for us, both going in and out of a country, and reduction of tariffs in India would be very, very helpful to us.
So let me be direct. What's holding back a prosperous semiconductor trading partnership or a manufacturing partnership that's beneficial for U.S. companies? The number one issue that's holding it back.
First of all, it's not being held back. We're already seeing some progress. In the last couple of years, there have been very nice announcements of steps forward. I think it's very important for India to think about this as an incremental process, one step at a time, small bites, small but many bites at the apple, to build confidence and show that India is doing all the right things. Key things are infrastructure, water, transportation, electricity. But again, another key thing is a trade policy that helps us do more manufacturing in India. We very much like the kind of overarching willingness of the Indian government to take steps in the right direction, and that creates a policy ecosystem that's favorable to us.
When you speak about a lower tariff regime, how much lower?
We like zero. I mean, there's something called the Information Technology Agreement in the WTO that puts all sorts of tech products to zero tariffs. India is a part of the first version of the ITA. We would like to be part of the second version, which came about in 2015. India wasn't a part of that. All sorts of parts and components and things that are important to our industry are in Part 2 of the ITA. So we get zero tariff treatment all around the world from countries that are competing for our supply chain business. We don't get that in India.
So if you're saying that there are countries in Southeast Asia competing for U.S. manufacturing supply chains, where is the China Plus One investments actually going? The biggest chunk.
So first of all, just put that in context. Coming off the pandemic, one thing that became crystal clear to all of us is that we have to mitigate against over-concentrations in our supply chains. So it's not just China, but just generally, our industry has been working to spread out the peanut butter across the globe thinner so that there's kind of no one place as much as possible that leaves us very vulnerable to geopolitical, seismic, other kinds of risks. So I'll just say there's not one place where this diversification is happening, and that's the way it should happen. It should be spread across the globe.
Right. But when it comes to the larger partnership with India, which are the areas where you hope India can work on that will boost the manufacturing in India, apart from tariffs, for example?
So, India is already very strong on talent. when it comes to design. 20% of our industry's design workforce is actually in India. But the talent to design a chip is not the same talent to manufacture a chip. So as India is thinking through putting education programs in place, that is also an important factor.
How worried are you about the US-China trade war? Trump has already started imposing tariffs on different countries, putting them on pause for better negotiations. But an all-out US-China trade war, how bad will it be for American businesses this time around?
Yeah, I don't think this would be, trade wars aren't really good for any sector. I think semiconductor industry would be extremely exposed because we are very dependent on the global supply chains. We're hopeful that this scenario doesn't play out in that way, and that the governments can come together and figure out a path forward that allows us to continue to trade freely across borders.
My final question would be, we've just seen an announcement by Lam Research to increase investments in India by about $1 billion. What's your outlook as someone who interacts heavily with American semiconductor companies and those around the world? What's the investment offtake that you could expect in India over the next 12 to 18 months?
Well, I'm not in the business of putting numbers on things like that. It's not a career enhancer for me. But I think it's just yet another example that India is basically on the right trajectory, and it needs to turn the dials a bit to improve that trajectory, consistent with some of the things we discussed today.
it is important for US companies to explore India, to get access to the Indian market, but at the same time have a level playing field.
The defense trade has grown tremendously as I've observed it over the years.
To have optionality, it's good for U.S., good for U.S. economy, good for business, good for long-term relationships.
Right.
But it's also good for pricing for the Indian consumers.
Here in Washington, D.C., there is a feeling among US-India watchers that if India wants to reduce the trade deficit very quickly, then it must buy more crude oil, more LNG from the US. I got in touch with Mark Menezes, the president and CEO of US Energy Association, to find out more. What do you expect to be on the table when the two leaders meet, especially in terms of India buying more energy from the US?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me and a chance to really talk about really this new dynamism, that we will see between President Trump and Modi in the upcoming meetings. It's going to be a building on a long-term relationship. I mean, these two men have a genuine fondness for one another. And if we go back to Trump 1, where, President Trump and Modi, they took the initiative then to establish a strategic energy partnership, which was comprehensive in scope, by the way. And at the time, you will remember, the U.S. was just really beginning to export LNG. We had been able to develop the facilities to export. And India was one of the first locations that U.S. LNG went. And what was interesting was that, these LNG facilities that we had been developing were expected, frankly, to go to other parts of Asia, not so much India. So it was really quite a dynamic surprise to see that we could help our partners, India, to provide that. So I would expect you to see a sort of a continuation of that, really, an acknowledgement of our past relationship. The importance of India in the region, the importance that energy plays in maintaining global security and economic prosperity. But importantly, too, India is going to need energy long term, right? It's one of the great countries that continue to increase population. Your current population needs energy. And as we talked about, whether it's U.S. LNG, whether it's U.S. technology in nuclear space, whether it's the latest technology on natural gas turbines, or how it is that you can build more renewables with natural gas, really to bring energy of all sorts, to India. So that's what we're excited about here in the upcoming meetings.
Do you expect the U.S. government to demand that India have more long-term LNG contracts and long-term crude oil contracts with the U.S. companies?
Yeah, right. I mean, so that's the hope. We want a long-term relationship, right? It's important that these facilities, as India knows full well because of your facilities that you have operating there, whether it's refineries or import facilities, these are highly capital facilities, that you need. And you need long-term offtake agreements. And it is important that, again, our partners across the world realize that your options for energy are well known, right? And U.S. has not necessarily been there for to be a partnership, right? Really until the shale revolution. And it turns out that due to technological improvements, and we got our policies in order to allow states to allow fracking, if you will, we really became the world's largest producer of both oil and natural gas. So now countries like India, before, who you had to pay a premium for Mideast oil or Mideast natural gas, or deal with other countries that you really had no choice as to who you were going to deal with, right? Well, now the U.S. is available as a partner, right? And I think that generally to have optionality, it's good for U.S., good for U.S. economy, good for business, good for long-term relationships.
Right.
But it's also good for pricing for the Indian consumers, because now you can either have long-term contracts, you also have the option for spot markets, because what we have seen really since the last time that we talked about this back during Trump 1, the natural gas global market has really evolved at the level almost like the oil market, where prices in the U.S., prices in India are set by the global price of where these commodities are traded. And now we're seeing that with natural gas.
Right.
So the consumers in India can benefit with more suppliers, more optionality, it's going to decrease prices, and it'll benefit our partnership.
Will Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump discuss a limited trade deal? Joining us right now to talk about this is Mark Linscott, who was Assistant USTR in the previous Trump administration. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Do you think when Donald Trump and Prime Minister Will Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump discuss a limited trade deal? Joining us right now to talk about this is Mark Linscott, who was Assistant USTR in the previous Trump administration. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Do you think when Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi meet for the first time after Trump administration was sworn in for a second time, do you think we'll start from where we left off trade negotiations in Trump 1.0?
Thanks, Parkshit. Well, in fact, I think they will in broad terms. The deal that was being discussed, negotiated during the first Trump administration, it was limited. There were a few tariffs on the table. There was some market access for agriculture. There was obviously the benefits under the Generalized System of Preferences program, the GSP program, but it was limited. I think this time, the two sides will, in fact, the two leaders will agree that we should start a trade negotiation, seek to conclude it ambitiously, perhaps by the end of the year, and essentially put everything on the table. Tariffs, market access, non-tariff barriers, goods and services, intellectual property rights. I think that's where it will lead. It will be a hard negotiation. There's no doubt about it. There will be sensitive areas for both sides, but I think they gained experience the last time around. I was a negotiator at that time. I think both sides are better prepared for that kind of negotiation. So I'm quite optimistic.
So, Mark, what we'd want to understand is which are the areas where you expect the US side to expect more trade concessions?
Well, certainly tariffs. I mean, that will be a priority. President Trump is clearly always preoccupied by tariffs. He feels that many countries around the world do not play fairly with tariffs and that U.S. tariffs are too low. So he's very focused on raising U.S. tariffs, perhaps in certain sectors like steel and aluminum to be in place for some time, but also looking for trade deals. And I think tariffs will be, what is a preoccupation, certainly in the area of goods. But, I think services will be on the table, particularly digital services. This was an area that was not a high priority during the Biden administration, so I think we'll have a switch back to that being on the table. Areas like intellectual property rights, as I referenced before. So I think it will be wide-ranging. I expect India and Prime Minister Modi will have wide-ranging expectations as well. This should be a two-way street in terms of trade negotiations.
Yeah, trade negotiations always have to be win-win. Which are the areas where you expect the two sides to clash or the negotiations to be really tough on?
Well, I highlighted agriculture, and yet agriculture always presents difficulties and sensitivities. Each country will have constituencies who don't want to open up very much. So agriculture will be complicated, I think. Noting, digital. I mean, this is an area where India is a world leader. It's had tremendous success over many years. And in fact, the U.S. has a trade deficit in services with India. That's kind of unusual. It's more common that there's a trade deficit on goods. There's actually a trade deficit on services. Yet there are a lot of questions about the potential for new digital services taxes or data localization requirements. Lots up in the air. So I think that could be a challenging area for negotiation.
Right. India has already tried to sweeten the deal by reducing tariffs on electric vehicle batteries, on high-end motorcycles, high-end cars, which may help American car makers, American motorcycle makers like Harley Davidson. Will that be good news for Donald Trump?
We'll see. We'll see what actually is put on offer. We saw those tariff cuts in the budget. Frankly, I'm a little skeptical on the motorcycle tariffs. This was an issue that we were negotiating when I was back at USTR and I was leading the U.S. delegation. And in some respects, I think time has passed on in that specific sector. I don't know that it's going to be a priority going forward. EVs, difficult to say because we know what Trump has said about climate policies and emphasizing clean energy technologies. So they may get traction. It's just hard to tell. In the electronic sector, there's potential there. But I think the big game to come is the broader trade negotiation.
And finally, where Trump is right now, what do you think he will want from India in terms of trade, in terms of a fair trading partnership, keeping in mind his biggest geopolitical priorities?
He really is quite focused on this notion of reciprocal tariffs, that if the U.S. has a tariff of 2% and another country has a tariff of 100%, either that country needs to bring its tariffs down or the U.S. will raise its tariffs. And that is it has long been a preoccupation.
So do you believe it's just a matter of time before Donald Trump slaps tariffs on the Indian side?
Certainly the threats of tariffs are coming. I think they are likely. Whether it will move towards actual imposition of tariffs. And the Prime Minister Modi's visit could be key in whether that happens or not. It's certainly possible that Prime Minister Modi will say, hey, let's immediately launch this trade negotiation. We'll put everything on the table. We'll put tariffs on the table. It's possible that the president responds by saying, okay, we will wait on tariffs. We'll apply tariffs to other countries, but we'll wait for India to see where this negotiation goes. That's a possibility.
All right.
But again, it's always unpredictable.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much for joining
course.
us, speaking
Thanks so
about
much.
the India-US trading partnership and what Donald Trump may expect from the Indian government. Always
Absolutely.
a pleasure.
It's a pleasure here too. Thanks.
Great.
All right, that's all we could pack in on this special broadcast from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for watching and keep tuning in to CNBC-TV18 for all the latest updates on the big Trump-Modi meet.